Welcome to Therapy Cable. I'm Dr. Ehsan Garashidaki, and we will be dedicating this video to the topic of stalking and relationships, as well as personality disorders. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for watching our videos and leaving comments. We would really appreciate your feedback. That helps us produce better videos, such as this one, that is more focused and concentrated on a specific topic. In this case, the relationship between personality disorders and stalking. When it comes down to using this information that I want to share with you, I want to bring up the reason actually why this would be useful. People who are being stalked a lot of times feel helpless in facing the situation. It is scary. It's a scary situation, and also they feel alone and really without much protection. Because first of all, it is very hard to establish that type of a fact that this threat exists in the first place. There are certain signs in windows, fleeting comments and actions that are very hard to follow and document. So the person who is being stalked may see it, may become the target of all those threats and attacks and actions and signs and attempts at really just harming them and intrusion of their privacy, but nobody else around really knows about the depth and the real damage that, especially the emotional toll that it takes on the person who is being stalked. So therefore, it's very difficult to really communicate to others as well, without coming off across as paranoid and irrational. That's why we're actually making this video, to help people who perhaps are being stalked to gain some knowledge, to glean something about perhaps some root causes of the stalking that are linked to the personality type, especially certain personality disorders of the individual who is stalking. So without further ado, let's get into it. In order to understand this linkage, we really need to go through the established set of personality disorders and their characteristics, and see how we can link them. So what I would do is very quickly list these personality disorders, and then just kind of explain how their characteristics can lead to that type of a stalking behavior, and what the person who is being stalked can do about it. So in terms of personality disorders, what I use is the DSM classification, or Diagnostic and Statistical Manual classification, that is published by APA. There are 3 clusters, generally cluster A being the odd eccentric type of a group, and cluster B the emotional dramatic type of a group, and cluster C the fearful anxious type of a group. So with cluster A, we have a schizotypal, schizoid, and paranoid categories. So schizotypal, let's start with that. A schizotypal person generally would perhaps engage in some stalking, or their actions may come across that are aligned with stalking, mostly because of the oddness in their and the awkwardness in their presentation, in their behavior, in their interaction and exchange with their environment. So to give you an example, a normal way of following up with a person, or showing affection, or wanting to be around a person follows a certain social protocol, where you are adept at establishing that type of a relationship early on. You have patience, you don't intrude into a person's privacy, too much. You may throw in certain innuendos, hints that you're interested in communicating or remaining in contact with a person. It could be anything from a kind of a very friendly type of a text, sending a text, maybe kind of posting something on their social media, and maybe give them a call, maybe when you pass them in the hallway or we see them somewhere, to just kind of say hi, introduce yourselves, and gradually, without sending a message of threat, really finding your way around them, be it in networking events or meetings, perhaps company meetings or social meetings, and really have a good reason actually for connecting with them, talking to them, getting to know them, and also making yourself known and introducing yourself and sharing information about yourself. That's more or less an acceptable social protocol, but it takes time and you cannot rush it, and you have to gauge the success and the necessity to continue this social script based on the desire and willingness of all parties who are involved. So a person with schizotypal personality disorder may really lack all of these skills that we mentioned. They may come across as very awkward and odd and inept and unskilled. And as a result, also perhaps because of the timing is wrong or their pace is wrong, they're impatient, maybe they don't know what to say specifically in a particular situation, or what they say is off the charts, it's a little bit extreme or exaggerated, then they throw the whole script off balance. They literally end up inducing some awkwardness, sense of fear, or unpleasant memory and emotion in the person that they would like to actually get to know. And therefore, the person being targeted by this awkwardness, they may even distance themselves even more, which can send even more of a wrong message, if you will, to the stalker, who has this high desire with being in touch and connected to their target subject, and even exacerbate their interaction and the awkwardness of the interaction. So now, a person who is being stalked, they could more or less gauge this situation by knowing these traits about the schizotypal personality disorder, and make a decision for themselves about whether or not this seeming stalking behavior is an actual stalking behavior, and or a very threatening, life-threatening even type of a situation, or maybe a simple awkwardness and due to lack of and a void of skills and appropriate behavior and responsiveness from the person. So at times that would be helpful, which, by the way, any of these suggestions that I make would require a little bit of an in-depth look at personality disorders and knowing what they are and what their characteristics are, which we can't really go into in this video because I want to go through all the categories and just kind of very superficially, if you will, connect their characteristics to the behavior of stalking. To just shed some light, open some windows, and get your interest to the point that if you would really be interested, you can certainly ask us for more information. We would be willing to produce another video about the more in-depth relationship between only one category of personality disorders and then the behavior of stalking. So the next one in the cluster A being schizoid or schizoid personality disorder, that is honestly, I would be surprised to see someone with schizoid personality disorder becoming a stalker, because they're not even interested really that much in connections, in belonging, in being attached to other people. There is real lack of desire, so they don't enjoy that type of a mostly desirable social connectedness. They want to be alone. They want to be isolated. They want to just be by themselves. So I wouldn't see why there would even be a desire for stalking. So most likely we can even exclude that. However, there are always exceptions. Just in case a person is highly, a person with schizoid personality disorder is highly enamored by their target subject. So, for instance, they may become a fan of a celebrity, and they just, in their own fantasy, fall in love, head over heels with that particular celebrity. But then, because generally they have not learned how to, again, go through that script that we talked about in terms of social attraction and social connection and interaction, then they find themselves in a pickle, in a dilemma. On the one hand, they don't desire any connection. They haven't learned those skills. On the other hand, they're, so fantastically involved and enamored and in love with a person. And as a result, just being so hyper-focused on wanting to make some connection and make themselves known, or kind of get in contact with that person. So that could be the case. And what I would really suggest is that, again, the person who is being stalked would need to really actually learn more about the stalker. And that would be one of the ways of protecting oneself. If a person who is being victimized doesn't know about the person of their attacker, then how can they really have any type of a leverage in order to be able to predict the next move, or know more in depth about what the probabilities are of the attacker or this stalker to kind of plan their next interaction. It's good for a targeted person, and I'm trying to refrain from the word victim because that's just too victimizing by itself. But the targeted person, it's good for a targeted person to have more knowledge. As a means of empowering themselves, they need to know more about the situation, about the stalker. So that would be really the first step and requirement, whether or not first of all, who is that stalker? Where do they come from? What are their habits? Do they have, in this case, as I mentioned, if it is a celebrity being stalked, they could try to find out. Perhaps they may have even some resources to pour into, who that stalker is. What is their social media behavior? What is their online behavior? What's their offline behavior? What do they do in real life, if possible? Certainly, if not possible, there are other means to take, other measures to take, such as just kind of blocking that person and on the social media, and or other ways of, again, just kind of blocking the access to that person, and so forth and so on. There are other ways of protecting oneself. We're not dedicating this video to the protection. We're just dedicating to this linkage between personality disorders and the behavior of stalking. So I think I've said enough about that category of schizoid. Let's move on to paranoid personality disorder. So with paranoid personality disorder, I would say it's quite the reverse. If people who are very paranoid and they have an actual paranoid personality disorder, they are very much like the other category, schizoid, the least likely to actually stalk another person, because they are themselves so highly preoccupied with the fear of being persecuted or stalked or monitored, or their privacy being invaded by others, being the target rather than being the attacker or the stalker themselves. So I would be very, very surprised if a stalker would have a paranoid personality, unless it's really kind of aligned with their own fear. Meaning, if a person who is highly paranoid about being monitored and spied on would kind of try to reverse that process by themselves because they want to control the situation and protect themselves. They may turn purposefully into keeping an eye on the purported, their own purported stalker or persecutor. That could be possible, but again, we would want to know much more about the personality, the person of that individual, whether or not that's actually the case, whether or not they have paranoid personality. So generally, I would really say that from cluster A, I wouldn't worry about schizoid and paranoid personality becoming stalkers, but certainly the schizotypal, and also less worried about being a real target as far as a stalker who is out to harm me, but more interested in simply this phenomenon that lack of social skills and interpersonal skills and appropriateness in a social setting really leads to this perception of awkward interaction, and I think open communication with that person actually would dissolve the situation. So if I was being stalked or seemingly stalked by someone who has this awkward sense of behavior, which is kind of in a safe environment, not necessarily one-on-one, but with another person, sit down and have an open conversation that, I've noticed that, you're interested in making some connection with me, etc. And I appreciate that. However, these are certain reasons that I'm not interested. I hope that doesn't come across as, disrespectful, but and if it comes across as rejecting and disapproving, it may, but there's not much I can do about it. And I do want to express my appreciation for your level of desire and affection, but I cannot reciprocate it. And this is more of a role modeling, really teaching the other person that simply reality of being human includes that type of mismatch between certain people. One person may have certain desire that doesn't have to be reciprocated, but it can be acknowledged and validated, and then kind of shift to a higher ground of communication between people where they can come to really reciprocally acknowledge that the attention and the fact that the person takes their time, attends to the this kind of affection, if you will, or a sign of affection of another person, and acknowledges, but also respectfully rejects it, respectfully expresses their disagreement or their mismatch. It's okay to have a mismatch in life and respectfully acknowledge it and go our own ways and kind of depart from that moment of that could turn into more of explosive contention. That would be my suggestion with any person, really. So cluster B, being the emotional dramatic, includes the 4 categories: antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic. So, and you can kind of understand why it becomes more dangerous, because from the get-go, with an antisocial personality disorder, we have someone who blatantly and willingly, very much in a committed, dedicated fashion, disregards social norms. They are anti-social, meaning more or less anti-norms, anti-authority, anti-regulation. So they despise that, even though they do desire to be part of the society and group. They just see themselves above all the norms and regulations and laws. They believe that they don't apply to them and they should be kind of above and on top of everybody else. So Now, that can certainly lead to a dangerous situation, because if somebody with antisocial behavior is interested in their target subject, and stalking a person, they could care less about being punished, even being imprisoned, being really kind of facing the worst kind of threat in their lives. They're at times used to it, and they don't mind actually to thrive in that type of a very conflictual, contentious, adversarial type of environment. So therefore, I would be very careful if the person that is stalking me, displays certain behaviors that, or maybe even history of disregarding the law or law enforcement, or court orders, or again any type of a legal, if you will, ordinances that are put on them, or orders that are put on them, then I would be very, very careful. I would gain as much evidence as I could, and then also really share it with law enforcement, get an attorney on my side, get more support with people knowing my whereabouts, being available to help me, and also being able to reach out to anyone, a support person at any given moment. Because dealing with an antisocial is not going to be an easy matter, and also again one of the most dangerous type of situations. So again, you would want to know about the history of behaviors of the person that stalking you, if that's the case, if you're being stalked, and again link it to this pattern of disregarding rules, norms, laws, regulations, court orders, law enforcement engagements, and so forth. Next category, borderline personality disorder 2, is one of the more dangerous situations, because again, people with borderline personality and very, kind of an extreme level of borderline personality disorders, they can be so black and white, and they can flip in a given moment, and be so highly emotionally dysregulated to the point that they don't even, are not really aware of the ramifications of their actions in the moment, in that heated moment. So they may just blow the fuse and just engage in some kind of an extreme behavior, including hurting themselves or hurting other people. In the heat of the moment, they could just shoot someone, or kill someone, or feel so internally conflicted and in pain that there can become a justification for them to feel that they're justified and rightful in hurting another person, for instance, for taking the life of the person they're stalking, kind of getting back at them, if you will, for all the rejection and abandonment and negative feelings that they have felt. So I would also be careful with a borderline personality disorder, type of a stalker, and knowing that particularly their predicament has to do with their own emotional dysregulation. Feelings of rejections are extremely triggering and distorting reality for people with borderline personality disorder. So therefore, I would take that also seriously. Now, my most concern here in this video is particularly with the person being stalked, so rather than the stalker. Therefore, I'm just going to limit my conversation here and presentation to what the stalker can do. There are other videos we have produced about personality disorders. People who have these personality disorders, they're welcome to watch our other videos on cluster A, B, C, and see what they can do for themselves to seek treatment or find some kind of a solution for themselves or their loved ones. And now next category within cluster B would be, let's say, histrionic. And histrionic personality disorder being also a very dramatic, emotional, and highly seductive person, mostly relying on a lot of flirtation, seduction, sexuality, sensuality, and sexual relationship, if you will, to remain the center of attention and get what they want and influence and manipulate the relationship or the partners that they are involved with, or people they're involved with, certainly can also become a pretty good energetic source for stalking another person, just in case they don't get what they want. So they may become hyper focused, on their target subject. And to understand that category 2 for a person who is being stalked, they can sift through and discern type of personality by noticing more or less if their stalker is the type of person who is highly engaged in highly sexualized, sensualized type of again seductive and sexuality oriented type of a focus within the relationship, or no, it's not just that, and it's not only tainted by the notion of seduction and flirtation and sensuality and sexuality. So and really just kind of attention seeking. If that's the case, then again, I would be within this whole cluster. I would be careful, because individuals with histrionic personality disorder, they can also become highly emotional about the relationship and situation, their position and the position of their target subject, and again the feeling of rejection, and they may act and enact certain dangerous type of behavior for themselves and the person they're stalking. Lastly, narcissistic personality disorder, it can also be one of the more dangerous, and literally because to a narcissist, and there are different types of narcissists, and I'm just going to pick one of them that's most dangerous, is when a narcissist basically regards everybody else as really just kind of their own as an object that just belong to them, more or less a property, some less valuable property that can be disposed of, that can be used and abused or disposed of at any given moment, and only is as valuable as the opinion of the narcissist allows them to be valuable, because the narcissist regards themselves as higher than everybody else and much more valuable and worthy than everybody else. So it can really lead to a point where a person with that narcissistic personality disorder can give themselves the right to do whatever with this property, with this person that they're targeting, and they see it literally as their own their right. They have the right to do to this person whatever they like, because that's the way they look at the world, and the way they see themselves, they see their relationships. So they have a very limited, narrowed view where in a power position is prominent, and they see themselves as all powerful and worthy, and the other person as unworthy and powerless. So I would be careful about that as well. And again, there are lots of different signs and symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder that you can read about or view in our other videos. And so if any of those characteristics are present in any of these 4 categories of cluster B, would really suggest that the person who is being stalked takes this seriously. Certainly try to understand the situation and the person that is stalking them, and see, kind of differentiate between these categories. And ultimately also there are different levels of interaction between the stalker and the person being stalked. We have had a guest in the past on Therapy Cable, and where she mentioned that she was in a loving, close, intimate relationship with a stalker, a person who ultimately became a predator and assaulter, if you will, and the person who was, this almost really, actually not almost, but a celebrity who was on our channel for years, had to challenge and fight against their partner, live-in partner, and then separate themselves and get a divorce, and really just kind of get even the FBI and law enforcement so involved to the point that she had some sense of protection and safety and peacefulness, knowing that everything was out on the table and everybody knew that she was in danger. Therefore, there was enough protection available around her against that stalker. Lastly would be the cluster C, and the cluster C includes the three categories: avoidant personality disorder, dependent personality disorder, and obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Now, with avoidant personality disorder, again, that is something that's kind of 50-50, I would say. Generally, people who avoid social situations, it's not because they lack a desire to be in situations. It's mostly because they fear that embarrassment of being, really criticized in public. That fear of criticism, of fear of ridicule, fear of being embarrassed in certain situations, especially social situations, keeps them from avoiding the situation. So they may turn at times into a stalker just because, again, due to some infatuation with the target subject. They may want to establish some connections, like very much privately, and not knowing exactly how to do it in a social setting. They may go behind doors, behind the scene, behind the curtain, and try to establish some kind of a connection and become highly preoccupied with that. So, and it wouldn't be one of those major dangerous situations, but it certainly can turn into, however, in the beginning at least, it's more of that, again, lack of social skills that lead this person to not be openly, engaging and connecting with their target, the target of their infatuation, but much more indirectly, wanting to kind of privately establish some connection, mostly due to their shyness. And because they're mostly really just kind of shy and reserved individuals, I don't believe that they would be highly probable candidates for being a dangerous stalker. However, again, there's always exceptions, so that is a category to also think about, just in case this type of behavior is being observed, where a person, they don't show up in social settings and they don't openly express their affection or intentions, but they somehow go behind doors, etc. That's an indication that, okay, their shyness and social awkwardness and lack of social skills is kind of preventing them. So what to do in this situation, like I mentioned earlier, I would literally just kind of invite this type of person who is hiding behind the curtains and closed doors and behind certain methods. I would really invite them and kind of encourage them to be more socially active, and kind of welcome them to be openly expressive and connecting in an open forum, because actually that's much better for them, and also helps them become more realistic and kind of let go of their preoccupation with stalking one person, because again they kind of heal in their process. Then we have the dependent personality disorder, whose fear mostly kind of revolves around taking responsibility for their decisions. They're afraid of making mistakes and making the wrong decisions, so and literally kind of having to live with those consequences. So they kind of rely heavily on others to make certain decisions. And again, based on that, they may, again, it's kind of a 50-50 situation too, but simply because that type of a stalking behavior includes a lot of decision making that need to actually be done independently by a person, because usually the stalker is just kind of acting individually, not in a group, not with other people. I would say that that's not a typical candidate for a stalker. Lastly, OCPD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, they're very much perfectionists, if you will, and that can also become a candidate for a stalker, someone who is so perfectionistically preoccupied with the notion of wanting to achieve something. They're usually type A personalities and have their lives in order. So if they are set on obtaining something, especially a target subject of their affection, they may very much engage in a very compulsive and obsessive pattern of being highly focused on this person and doing everything they can to kind of gain the attention of their target subject. So that can be an issue. And as we know, their problem is around really just kind of letting go and, not controlling, wanting to control. That's their problem. They want to control, predict everything in the future and control their lives. So therefore also control a relationship and control a person. And if that's the case, they really need to work on their own self, to let go, to learn how to let go and live with imperfection, and just understand that it's a futile proposition to want to control everything in our lives, and it's detrimental to themselves in the first place. There's really not much that the person being stalked can do about it, unless the stalker is open enough to seek treatment for their overly obsessive targeting. But again, at least knowledge about this can help a person who is being stalked kind of first of all differentiate, what type of a stalker am I dealing with here? Is it the more dangerous? Is it the less dangerous? Is it the more shy person or inept person versus the more highly skilled and focused and energetic person? Is it, do I need to have a conversation with this person? Is it even possible? Can I have it in private? Can I have it in public? Can I have it with a third party involved? So these are good, really, just like I mentioned, this video is more of a superficial overview of all these linkages between personality disorders and stalking, rather than an in-depth expert opinion and set of solutions. So if you are interested in knowing more about perhaps one of these linkages and more details about how to either protect yourself from being stalked, or again opening that kind of channel of communication between yourself and the stalker, and understand how to go about it and resolve the situation, and or the other side, if you are feeling like you are literally stalking someone and you don't like it either, but you're just kind of preoccupied with it and obsessed by it, and you want to have a resolution to it, feel free to contact us. Let us know. We can create another video on that particular topic, and leave us some comments. We really appreciate your viewing our videos, and we'll see you next time around. Thank you.